Warning, I swear a lot.
It is 3:30 in the PM and you're watching The Foreman. I'm your host, Foreman, and today, despite the heavy focus that this series kind of has had on Bloodborne, because it's usually the footage used for the visuals, I wanted to talk about Bloodborne anyway, because fairly recently, I fought Ludwig from in the Hunter's Nightmare, from the old Hunter's DLC, and Maria, who is also in the Hunter's Nightmare and from the old Hunter's DLC, and the two of them are probably the best bosses in the game, in its entirety, in my opinion. I used to feel that Cleric Beast and Father Gascoigne were the best, purely because they provided such a fantastic introduction to Bloodborne as a whole. Because Cleric Beast and Father Gascoigne both represent what you should expect to go up against in terms of bosses, both also having exceptional tracks, and the styles of the fight just generally being quite exciting and quite stressful. Even to experienced players, where it's like, yes, you and I, people who have played Bloodborne many times, can probably beat Cleric Beast and Father Gascoigne on our first try without too much issue, but it's still quite an adrenaline-fueling and intense fight either way, both of them are, and that's why I like them so much. Honorable mention to Vic or Amelia for providing something similar, but not quite the same extent. I really like those two bosses. I think they are an exceptional example. However, Ludwig and Lady Maria are on an entirely different level. Ludwig's introduction, fuck it, both of their introductions are exceptional. Both of their boss soundtracks are exceptional. The fights themselves are exceptional. The way they change are exceptional. They're both really fucking hard, and and both of them provide great rewards upon beating them, and they're both incredibly interesting to the lore of Bloodborne as a whole. But what I wanted to address today, and I don't even know if I'm going to actually be able to figure out an answer at the end of this, but I wanted to think about it and talk about it, is which of the two is my favorite? Because there can only be one, right? There can only be one. For the longest time, I would have told you that Maria was my favorite boss fight, and that might not necessarily have changed, because she is a fantastic boss fight, but having fought Ludwig recently, I don't know, man. I don't know. That soundtrack is so good. The way it changes when he shifts into his second phase. His second phase is an awesome idea for that boss fight. It doesn't make it unbearably difficult, because his attack patterns completely change. The entire boss fight completely changes, and if you lose, you have to go back to fighting his first form, which is a pain in the ass, but I can't honestly say it's unexpected or unreasonable, but it is very annoying. But it is made up for the fact that you can get more blood. The boss run is very quick, and you can get more blood vials every single time. You'll get 5 blood vials every single time you make that boss run, which is quite good, because in the boss fight with Lady Maria, I fucking ran out of blood vials and wanted to die, which she was only too happy to oblige me with. And it's interesting, actually, because I could draw parallels back to Cleric Beast and Father Gascoigne, because it is the same lineup, as it were, of bosses, a beast and a hunter, because those are the best boss fights in the game. And also some of the worst, you know, One Reborn and Mikolash notwithstanding. Although Mikolash is technically not a hunter, you're splitting hairs at that point. That's basically what he is, and he is so fucking boring and so fucking annoying, and can accidentally one-shot you with an arcane hit, and then it's like, we'll start again, dumbass. And the One Reborn, well, I've never lost to the One Reborn, but I could definitely see myself dying by accident and then having to go through that stupid boss fight again, and it's not a fun boss fight. It's very annoying, and not particularly hard either. But I'm getting off track. Ludwig, let's try and assess these one at a time. Ludwig, his intro, you step into this, I'd say blood-soaked is an understatement. Blood-filled is more appropriate. This room filled with blood. You fight the guy in a pool of blood, basically. The entire room is just filled with blood. And you have those little corpses nearby who talk about the horrific monster that causes them pain, that like fucks them up all the time. And then you look up, and he says Ludwig, which by this point you should at least be semi-familiar with whom Ludwig is, because it's mentioned in multiple pieces of equipment. And there's Ludwig's holy sword, which is the silver greatsword, which is a fantastic weapon. If you're not sure what weapon you want to use for a Bloodborne playthrough, go for that. Go for the standard silver greatsword in the game, because it's really fucking good. But you should be familiar with Ludwig by now. who is to some extent important in the Healing Church, and you see this absolutely horrific, fucked up abomination of a beast. It is by far the most visually impressive and visually disturbing beast in the game by a wide margin. Nothing comes close to Ludwig, with all the fucking limbs all over the place, the focus being more on a horse than like a wolf, because most of them do tend to focus on like wolves and stuff like that. Werewolves, you know, is kind of the running theme there. But his design is unique, and I can't stress this enough, horrifically fucked up, absolutely terrifying, extremely intimidating. His shrieks are horrible, and you can tell just by looking at him that this is going to be an ordeal, and you know what? It is. It is in fact an ordeal. It turns out to be a massive ordeal. But when you learn his moves, the nightmare phase of Ludwig isn't so bad, the beast phase, because everything he does has a counter. It does, like, you know, most bosses do. But nevertheless, it's a stressful situation, and you fight him knowing that one slip up will cause you to lose most of your health, and in fact he can one-shot you if you're not careful. That charge of his will one-shot you, but there's a lot of warning for the charge. Even when you 100% know how to do it, that first half of the boss fight feels like a desperate scrabble. You know, you're sort of desperately only just in time moving out of the way of his attacks and managing to land some in return, only for him to wildly whirl around and swipe at you again, or jump backwards while swinging, or do anything, jump up into the roof and then land again. There are many things he can do which keep you on edge the entire fucking time. And like the mechanics in which you can wound, if you hit the sides of him enough, then you stun him for a while, and I think future attacks do more damage on them, which is good because he's a very durable boss. And having a means by which to hit him multiple times and also do more damage with each hit is helpful and good for the overall boss design. But this does kind of tie into a downside I have about the boss, because I did mention the second phase, and the second phase is awesome. The cutscene leading into the second phase is fantastic in how it's presented, in how the music changes, and what it leads to, which is him basically taking on the form. He doesn't change visually, he doesn't change, but he stands upright. He's more like a centaur than a beast, and he's wielding the Moonlight Greatsword, and it is one hell of a fight, and he is even more intimidating in this form, I think, than he is in his beast form, which you wouldn't think is possible. But seeing this slathering monster suddenly regain its composure and talk like a human and stand upright and wield a weapon with skill as well. He's not just flailing the Moonlight Sword around. His swings are deliberate, and he does specific attacks with it, including magic attacks. But the fact that he is so fucking durable does make it a real pain in the ass, because you go into that second phase and you're like, I don't know what his moves are, I don't know what the patterns are, I don't know what to do, and then he stomps you, and then you have to fight the beast form again, and the beast form isn't hard when you fought it enough times, but is durable and takes a long time to get him down to half health, which is a fucking pain. And then you finally get back to that second phase, and then you get immediately stomped again. And you have to keep doing this until eventually you manage to start learning his moves in his second phase, but you'll still keep losing because you haven't learned all of them. And that big ranged attack he does when you get him down to a certain point of health, you basically have to eat that hit. You have to eat that and die in order to realize that you're kind of supposed to sprint up to him and get behind him in order to avoid it. How would you know that beforehand? You wouldn't. And indeed, it took me a long time to realize that that was a way to counter that. I had no idea. Most people wouldn't. So it feels a little unfair, I guess, and I think a few tweaks could resolve that issue. But having said that, that does kind of feed into what is so good about the boss, is that once you learn that shit and you fight him in his second phase and you counter everything he does and you manage to scrape out a win, it feels great. It feels fantastic. And then when you're rewarded with the Holy Moonlight Sword, it feels even better, because the Holy Moonlight Sword, A, is a great weapon. Like, if you haven't used it, I recommend using it because it's a powerful weapon with a good moveset. Not a particularly fancy or interesting moveset, but it is good. You know, good swings and all that, and it does a lot of poise damage. but the Moonlight Greatsword, which is a reoccurring staple of Souls games, and you managed to get it without doing some kind of stupid arbitrary bullshit, which a lot of the Souls games sometimes do. Dark Souls 1's was not that ridiculous, you just cut off Seath's tail, but sometimes the game really is like, yeah, the Moonlight Sword's here, don't know where it is though, but Bloodborne's just like, beat this boss and you'll get it. I think even if you don't talk to him in Healing Church garb, you can still get the sword. I don't think there's a way to screw yourself out of it, but I don't know for sure. Correct me if I'm wrong. I can't honestly remember. I always talk to him with the Healing Church garb on because I want to make sure I get that weapon. It's very important to me. Ludwig as a whole, it's just an excellent choice for a boss, and he's the first boss of the Hunter's Nightmare. What an introduction! You know, because the Hunter's Nightmare is pretty difficult up to this point. There's a lot of bullshit in the area that will fuck you up, but people might get to the boss and be like, alright, I finally got through it, I just gotta beat this boss. I've fought Bloodborne bosses before, I think I can handle it. And then Ludwig shows up, and your ego just disappears. It just melts into the nearest sewer grate because you thought you could handle a boss. No, you can't. You thought the boss might potentially be the most manageable part of this section. It's not. It's in fact probably the hardest. Get fucked, buddy boy. You thought you were gonna do fine. You're not. It's a bad time. It's a great time. It's a bad time. And it's kind of like the whole boss fight and just how satisfying it is kind of why when it comes to the point after the boss fight, you talk to him in the Healing Church gear and he asks, you know, are my hunters still as cool and noble and honorable as I hoped they would be? I can't help but say, yeah, no, bro, they're totally great, they're totally cool, and the most noble, virtuous guys ever, despite the fact you fought through a fucking legion of them up to this point who are blood drunk and stuck in Hunter's Nightmare because they've basically become beasts themselves in all but actual appearance, as it were. Like the Healing Church's hunters are fucked. It's a bad time, but I just can't tell him that because I'm like, you deserve better than this, Ludwig. You deserve better than being turned into a giant horse. You deserve better than to then die in misery and madness. You deserve something, and I gave him something. It was more than nothing, and it feels good. And then I got the sword, and it felt like a good reward. We'll move on to Maria now, because I think I've said everything I want to say about Ludwig for now. Special mention, because I didn't get to actually show it in my series because I forgot to start recording, but the research hall and the living failures, my god, what a fucking nightmare. The research hall itself is actually great. It's a really good area because it's horrible. It's horrible. It is a horrible place. It is an absolute horrible place. The pure implication of what has been done to the patients in the research hall goes beyond belief. They are fucked. They are so fucked. They are the most fucked things ever. They are completely screwed, and it is all. And I don't know why the Healing Church did it. I think they were experimenting with something. Hard to say. I don't know. I can't remember the specifics of it. But my god, did they do some fucked up shit? And Lady Maria was up to her fucking neck in it. The living failures are garbage. What a boring boss fight. Oh my god. Mob bosses just don't work in Souls games. They are not interesting. They will never be interesting, and no one will ever look at them and go, this was the highlight of my Souls experience. Was this boss, which consists of lots of weaker enemies. Yes, this was definitely the best part. Even the Shadows of Yharnam, who are 3 actually quite skilled fighters, are still like, this would be better if there was one Shadow of Yharnam and he kind of swapped between their movesets. That would make it a lot more interesting and a lot cooler. But, whatever. Let's get to Maria, because she is a fantastic follow-up to the Living Failures, because you fight the Living Failures and you go, wow, that was disappointing, especially after Ludwig, right? Just go into this fucking church and, oh, there's a corpse in here. Because I'd imagine at the time you aren't making the connection that the lady sat in the chair is in fact the same lady as the lady sat in the chair on the fucking promotional art for the Hunters, the old Hunters. You probably aren't making that connection in that moment, unless you literally, you know, have tabs of the wiki open right next to you, but I don't tend to play that way, at least not on my first time. You talk to her, and she's alive, you're like, oh god, she's alive. And you're like, is this just going to be like a FromSoftware cutscene or whatever? And then she pulls out the Rakuyo and detaches the blades into 2, and you're like, oh no, this is a fight. and then a boss health bar shows up and you're like, oh no, this is a real fight, and then she fucking kills you. Because if you're gonna sit there and try and tell me that you beat Lady Maria the first time you fought her, I'm gonna sit here and say I don't fucking believe you. I straight up don't believe you. I don't mean beat her on your first try on a playthrough. I mean the first time you ever fought her. If you try and tell me you beat her the first time, I'm gonna say you're full of shit, buddy. I'm sorry. Because if you actually did, that's really impressive, but there is no fucking way I will ever believe you. Never ever. Never ever ever. Because she is unbelievably tough. Unbelievably tough. She's not as durable as Ludwig. And her moveset doesn't really change that much, definitely not as dramatically as Ludwig's does. She switches between the two forms of the Rakuyo, one being the dual-wielding form, you know, dagger in one hand, blade in the other, which in the later forms just becomes two swords because she uses blood to lengthen them, so they just become two swords, which is not ideal. It's actually, her range is unbelievable in that fucking boss fight. There are a lot of occasions where I can watch an enemy do their attacks and I'm like, I can step around them. I don't need to dodge, I can walk around them. It was very rare I could do that in Maria's boss fight purely because her range was ridiculous. She always hits just further than you think she will. It's a real fucking pain. But the switch between dual blade and dual wielding Rakuyo aren't particularly troublesome. It is a pain, but it's not the worst thing in the world. But once those later phases start, it's weird because her moves don't change that much. Actually, I know what the biggest issue I have in terms of fighting Maria is, and it's her quote-unquote ranged attacks. I don't mean her gun, although the gun is a fucking issue actually for me. I'm talking that slash, which can hit like a third of the way across the boss room. I'm talking about that stab, which sends like a lance of blood across the room and can pretty much hit you on the opposite side. And I think she also has that one where she jumps into the air and then slams down, although to be honest, that's really not that bad. That one's quite easy to dodge because it's very heavily telegraphed. But the first two, the slash and the lance, oh my god, killed me more than anything else. Literally killed me more than anything else she has. Maybe not necessarily directly, maybe that wasn't the killing blow, but both of those attacks have the capability to one-shot you, and if they don't one-shot you, they will put you down to 10 or 5% of your health. They are insane, and that fucking lance, she charges it up for so long that I to this day, did not figure out what the timing was on that and could not dodge it reliably, which means I'd practically get hit by it every time. In fact, the best way to dodge that one, I think, was to try and get close. But she also kind of auto-tracks on those attacks, so trying to get close doesn't always work. She'll often catch you out anyway. The slash, well, you better make sure you're standing behind her, because I'm pretty sure that is like everything in front of her. Good fucking luck. But she is insane. Her fighting style is awesome. She's extremely intimidating. I only just learned today, because I quickly had a glance at the wiki before I started this video, that she can visceral attack you, and she has a unique visceral attack animation that looks really cool. Does it feel like maybe they were trying too hard to make Maria cool? Yeah, probably. Maybe the dual swords that are enhanced with her own blood and then can also shoot fire was a bit much. Maybe making her the toughest motherfucker you've ever seen might be a bit much. Maybe. But to be fair, she is really cool. It's not as if they've tried to make her cool and failed. That would be the worst. But they tried to make her cool and they succeeded. She's the coolest hunter in the game. If you have your own preferences, that's fine. I ain't gonna tell you you're wrong, because you're not wrong. But for me, she is the coolest. She is the coolest, bar none. She's the strongest. She's stronger than Gehrman. She's way stronger than Gehrman. Even though Gehrman's really fucking strong, she's stronger. She's so much stronger. She's much harder to beat. Which makes it weird then that, you know, he's the final boss and she isn't, but final bosses in Souls games are always a bit iffy. Gehrman's a good final boss fight, to be fair, but he's not the final boss, if you know what I mean. But I'm getting off topic. The room in which the fight takes place is great. It's just this wide open chapel, which is perfectly suitable, and it has those bookcases on the edges of the map which loudly break when you or her, or when either she or you dodges into them, which adds this nice punctuation in sound. It makes the fight seem a little more chaotic. when one of them gets broken. It's nice. Minor detail, but nice. The song is incredible. I should point out the song is incredible, especially when it starts to swell. And the swelling of the track is usually accompanied by her going into her second form, which is like the, oh no, shit's getting fucking real moment, which adds a nice level of gravity, a nice level of intensity to the fight. It's very good. It's difficult because I want to talk about it objectively, but I recently lost to her 74 times in a row. No, I'm not exaggerating. So I'm also a little bit prejudiced against her because that was a lot of pain. That was a lot of pain I went through. I had to do 2 recordings in order to actually be able to beat her, which put me behind schedule on my uploads. So I was a little salty about that. Gotta admit, I was a little salty. But she's just so fucking cool. I don't know how else to say it. She's just so fucking cool. The cape, the clothes, the hat, the calm demeanor. You know, she's very, very quiet, very calm, but determined and intimidating. God, she's intimidating. The way she grabs your character's hand and your character is like backing off during that cutscene, like, and then she draws 2 weapons. Amazing, truly amazing. And her position in which Simon kind of sets it up, you know, the guy who kind of follows you around in the nightmare, he kind of sets it up as if like, ah yes, the research hall is the secret that the Hunter's Nightmare was keeping from us. And it's like, no, that is a secret. It's not the secret. The secret is in fact hiding behind Lady Maria, and you have to get past her in order to get there. So she's blocking the big, important revelation of the Hunter's Nightmare, and also the hardest fucking area there. And oh my god, I'm really dreading going to the fishing hamlet, I've got to say, because that place is nightmarish. Yeah, no, fuck that place. I'm not looking forward to it at all. Gonna go there much later when I'm a much higher level. But she's important. She's important. They made her significant. They made her strong. And she's barely mentioned in the game up to this point. I think the only hint might, like, before the DLC, the only hint you'd get would be like the ornamental comb that you give to the doll. And the doll itself, of course, being a reference, but up to this point, you know, before the DLC came out, you had no idea who the fuck the doll was based on. You didn't think the doll was even based on anyone. You thought maybe the doll was a person who was turned into a doll. I don't know. It's a fucking FromSoftware game. The story is fucking loopy. It does whatever the fuck it wants. You think, oh, well, maybe this means this, and the game goes, nah, it means this, or it doesn't mean anything. I don't know. So it's cool. But I have to kind of get down to brass tacks now, I think, because otherwise I'm just going to keep repeating myself. Who is cooler? Who do I prefer? Who is better? Who is more impactful? Between Ludwig and Lady Maria. Who do I prefer? And it's a really hard one to say, I've got to be honest. Between the two of them, it's really hard to say, because they are both exceptional. I think Lady Maria makes a stronger impact. I'm not saying she's better, I'm just saying she makes a stronger impact, the way her boss fight is presented, the bullshit you've gone through to get there. Because like the Hunter's Nightmare leading up to Ludwig, yes, that area is a pain in the ass, but it's not like, it's not especially interesting. There's not like big revelations going on here. It's just a fucked up area. It's just a fucked up version of Central Yharnam. Interesting upon first glance, but once you've been there for a while, and you will be there for a while, not particularly interesting. You know, it's the aspect of Bloodborne that leans more into the Victorian-era vampires and werewolves kind of thing, rather than the Research Hall and Lady Maria, which lean more towards the Cthulhian aspect, and then the Fishing Hamlet, which is 100% Cthulhian, because that is literally like Innsmouth, or whatever it's called. You know, that Lovecraft story. So I'd say Lady Maria is more impactful purely because the area leading up to her, and then you get the shit boss fight beforehand, and then this happens. She definitely has more of an impact, and she's definitely harder, so she definitely leaves more of an impact in that respect. But having said all that, I think if I was to really play the two off against each other in my mind and come to a decision, I actually think now I prefer Ludwig. I actually think I prefer Ludwig. Something about him. His track is insane. It is such a good piece of boss music. It's so good, and the way it changes in the second phase is insane. Ludwig's boss feels more structured, which is strange because he himself is so much less composed than Lady Maria, but his boss fight feels a lot more structured. There's a phase 1 and a phase 2. The music follows this structuring. It feels a little more emotional as well, because you're seeing Ludwig's turmoil. You've seen what he's become, and then you've seen him become... You see yourself basically knock him back into sentience, which means he's still in there. This is still happening to him. He's aware of what's going on. He's aware of what he's become. And you have to wonder by that point why he's even still fighting you. Maybe because he just thinks he should be. Maybe because as far as he's concerned, you attacked him. Maybe because he knows he can't talk you out of it by this point because he attacked you in his beast form and he's just like, well, I've got to fight you. I have to kill you, you know, it's just... he doesn't know that you'd accept his surrender, so he just has to keep going. Or he's still corrupted by the nightmare. It's hard to say. Why is Ludwig in the nightmare now that I think about it? There was some stuff actually. Yes, I remember, because the guidance rune alleges to this. Because there's the rallying mechanic in the game, isn't there? Which is you take a hit and you have an imprint of your health bar left over from the damage you took, and if you attack your enemy, you get it back. And rallying, in game, in lore, is closely associated with bloodlust that the hunters feel upon fighting enemies and killing beasts and taking the blood and whatnot. It's intrinsically linked to the idea of going more and more bloodthirsty. And Ludwig himself very much focuses on rallying. That is clearly his style as a hunter, because the Holy Moonlight Sword is an exceptional rallying weapon. The guidance rune, which has some relevance to Ludwig, I can't remember what it is, increases your rally potential significantly. And it's also implied that the entity within the Holy Moonlight Sword is not necessarily benign. You know, it might kind of be a shit. It might be something that actually pushed him towards bloodlust and led him to the nightmare. Though the player does not suffer from this, but that might have been a bit difficult to have that be a whole thing for just one weapon if the character decided to just use the weapon, and many people would end up not discovering that that was a thing because they wouldn't use the weapon. So from a gameplay mechanic, that does make sense that they wouldn't make that a thing. But it's possible that the Moonlight Sword may have corrupted him. Possible that just because it's bright and glowy, it's not actually a good thing. It's not actually a nice thing. But I just adore Ludwig. I really do. Maria is my favorite hunter. That's not going to change. Maria is still my favorite hunter, and I think she's one of the best boss fights in the game, one of the best characters in the game through all of these respects. But I think Ludwig is my favorite boss. He's so fucked up. He's so fucked up. He is terrifying to look at. His attacks are wacky and all over the fucking place. There's a lot of different things he can do. He changes it up. And it's, as I said, his second phase really changes it up. It's gotta be Ludwig. It's gotta be Ludwig. He is such a cool character. He's such a cool boss fight. He's such a tragic figure. All he wanted was to lead the healing church to defend the people against beasts. He's not wrapped up in all the horrible bullshit of the game. He's not wrapped up in the harvesting of Kos or the communion with the Great Ones or any of that. He's not that. He's much more grounded. He's like, there are beasts out there and we gotta stop them. They're killing people and we gotta stop them. He tries to raise a normal militia, just people who haven't taken the blood, and arms them with weapons to try and fight the beasts, and they get massacred. So he has his healing church hunters and they go bloodlust crazy, and learning that, if you tell him that, it mentally breaks him. It actually mentally shatters him, and he just starts, I think he just sits there and starts laughing and like snorting and neighing like a horse. Like he goes completely off the deep end. Poor guy. Best boss fight in the game. Best boss fight in the game, bar none. That is my assessment now. That is my decision. If you disagree, that's completely fine, because it is 100% subjective. But I would appreciate it if you either A, let me know who you prefer, either Lady Maria or Ludwig, and or B, tell me who your favorite boss is. If it's neither of them, I definitely want to hear about it. If it's one of them, I still definitely want to hear about it. I just want to know what you think. Who is your favorite boss in Bloodborne? If you've played. If you haven't played, actually tell me anyway. Maybe, like, if you're like, oh, I like the concept of this boss, I've never fought them, but this one looks cool. Try that. Tell me what you think in that respect. So even if you haven't played Bloodborne, you can still weigh in. You can still give me your 2 cents worth. I want to hear it. I'm not going to sit here and go, you're wrong. Even if you say the one Reborn's my favorite boss because he looks so fucked up, I'll be like, you know what? From a conceptual standpoint, that's understandable. From a gameplay standpoint, it wouldn't make fucking sense at all. But that's why this makes sense, because you haven't fought him. But I'm rambling, ladies and gentlemen. It's time to end for today. This is a little shorter than Foreman Talks normally is, but I don't see the point in dragging these out too much, right? I do want to sit here and talk, and I do want to provide a decent amount of talking to make it worthwhile. But how much can I sit here and repeat myself? And how much, that seems disrespectful to you guys, in fact, to try and pad the length of these videos by repeating myself. Because I'm just providing you with fluff by that point. Already, these videos are more low effort than my normal stuff, just because I wanted something like that in the weeks to just kind of, it makes my Saturdays more relaxing, which I appreciate, because Sunday I'm straight back onto making videos as normal. But that is already a concession enough, and you guys seem to be perfectly happy with this, and you guys watch the Foreman Talks, which I do appreciate, but to try and pad these out with nonsense would just feel really disrespectful, so I don't want to do that. We're going to end for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think. Let me know which boss is your favorite, and as always, whatever I talk about next time, and I have no idea what the fuck it is, if you have a suggestion, let me know. Hope I see you there. Toodles. Goodbye.